think for so many of us as church leaders and as thinkers in the space of outreach, in the space of communication, in the space of evangelism, there are so many conversations about who we are post-COVID. Who are we coming out of the pandemic? Who are we coming out of this space of actually universal isolation for the church once the church begins to meet again? The truth of that question can only be answered, and the reality of that question can only be answered by our ability to be honest about who we were before the pandemic started. We can't discuss who we want to be coming out of the pandemic unless we discuss who we were pre-pandemic. We want to rush to get back to our communities, but who were we in our communities before the pandemic hit? We want to rush to get back into our churches, but what did our churches represent to the communities that we're rushing to get back to before the pandemic hit? Unless we can honestly have those questions, all we're rushing back to do is just a new version of the same old thing. All we're rushing back to do is to update our old practices. All we're rushing back to do is update our old methodologies. And the old methodologies didn't work. Our once a week church strangers, our focus on speaking to a community that we don't do life with, our focus on communicate or commuting into areas that to worship that we don't live in. All of those things, if we're talking about who we want to be after the pandemic, we have to have honest conversations about who we were before the pandemic as a church that communicates, as a church that integrates with communities, as a church that is seeking to do life in communities. Any discussion that fails to take pre-COVID into consideration is just doomed to repeat the same things post-COVID.